The floor tasted like industrial cleaner and dust when I hit it, my diploma still crinkling in my grip. I remember the screams, the flashbulbs popping like lightning, and the terrifying tunnel vision closing in. But the sharpest memory isn't the fall. It is waking up in a sterile hospital room to find my parents' phones going straight to voicemail, while my 80-year-old grandfather sat in the plastic chair by my bed. The only person who thought I was worth showing up for. The caffeine had stopped working 3 months ago. By the time I stood in front of the mirror on the morning of my graduation, adjusting the heavy velvet hood of my master's regalia, coffee was just a warm, brown placebo I swallowed out of habit. My hands were trembling. They had been trembling for weeks, a fine, vibratory hum beneath my skin that made holding a pen difficult and holding a conversation even harder. I told myself it was adrenaline. I told myself it was the natural physiological response to working 50 hours a week while completing a graduate degree that was designed to break people with nothing else to do, let alone people with a full-time mortgage and a demanding mid-level management job. I was 33 years old. I was too young to feel like my bones were made of lead pipes. But I was old enough to know how to fake vitality. I applied an extra layer of concealer under my eyes to hide the purple bruises of exhaustion. I pulled my hair back tight. I swallowed 2 ibuprofen for the headache that lived permanently at the base of my skull, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. Burnout. That was the word everyone used. It was the safe, corporate-approved term for feeling like you were slowly dying inside a gray cubicle. I had convinced myself that once I walked across that stage, once the diploma was in my hand, the fatigue would evaporate. I just had to get to the finish line. I drove to the university arena alone. The parking lot was a sea of families. There were fathers adjusting ties, mothers holding bouquets of overpriced flowers wrapped in crinkly plastic, and younger siblings looking bored and scrolling on their phones. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I navigated through the crowd, clutching my cap, scanning the faces for the 2 people who had promised they would be here. Marla and Gordon Bailey were not people who missed opportunities to be seen. My parents treated life like a series of photo opportunities, and my graduation from a prestigious business program was prime content for their social circles. They had talked about it for weeks. They had discussed what Marla would wear and where we would go for dinner afterwards. But as I stood near the entrance, checking my phone for the 10th time, the screen remained blank. I found a quiet corner near a concession stand and typed a text. I am here, entrance B. Where are you? 3 dots bubbled up immediately, then vanished, then bubbled again. Finally, a message appeared. So proud. Running late, save us seats. Love you. I stared at the screen. The text was polished, cheerful, and completely devoid of logistics. They did not ask where I was sitting. They did not ask for a ticket transfer. They did not ask what time the doors closed. It was a generic broadcast of affection. The kind of message you send when you are trying to buy time, or when you have no intention of showing up at all. A familiar coldness settled in my stomach, distinct from the nausea I had been fighting all morning. I knew this feeling. It was the same feeling I had at my high school swim meets when the bleachers remained empty, or the time they forgot to pick me up from the airport because they were hosting a dinner party. I walked into the arena alone. The noise inside was a physical weight. Thousands of voices bounced off the concrete walls, amplifying the throbbing in my head. The lights were too bright, stinging my eyes. I made my way to the section reserved for graduates, moving mechanically. Sit, stand, wait. I scanned the guest section. It was a chaotic tapestry of strangers, but my eyes snagged on a single figure sitting in the upper tier, near the aisle. Walter. My grandfather sat alone. He was wearing his navy Sunday suit, the one he had owned since the 90s, and he held a wrinkled program in both hands. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking around the room. He was looking straight down at the floor level, searching for me. He raised a hand when he saw me, a small, tentative wave. I felt a lump from in my throat, hot and sharp. I waved back. I could see the glint of his watch under the arena lights. It was an old silver timepiece with a cracked leather strap, the same one he used to take off his wrist and let me hold when I was 6 years old. Sitting on his living room carpet while my parents argued in the kitchen, listen to the heartbeat. "Stella," he used to say, "it never skips. It just keeps going." He had driven an hour to be here. He had parked, walked up the stairs, and found a seat, all without sending me a single text demanding directions or praise. He had just shown up. The ceremony began. The speeches were long, droning muffled sounds that seemed to come from underwater. I tried to focus, but the edges of my vision were beginning to blur. The heat in the room felt oppressive, humid and thick. My heart was doing something strange in my chest. A fluttering, erratic rhythm that made me feel like a bird was trapped behind my ribs. "Just get across the stage," I told myself. 30 seconds. Shake the hand, take the paper, walk off. They called the names in alphabetical order. Bailey was early in the list. That was a mercy. I stood up when the marshal signaled my row. The floor felt spongy beneath my heels. I placed a hand on the shoulder of the chair in front of me to steady myself. The girl next to me, a stranger with bright red lipstick, glanced at me with concern. "You look pale," she whispered. "Are you okay?" "I am fine," I lied. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else, just hungry. We shuffled forward. The line moved with agonizing slowness. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. The tunnel vision was worse now. The peripheral world was dissolving into gray static, leaving only a narrow circle of clarity directly in front of me. Stella Bailey. The announcer's voice boomed. It was my turn. I forced a smile. I knew where the cameras were. Marla had trained me well. Chin up, shoulders back, smile with your teeth. I walked toward the dean. The stage lights were blinding, white-hot suns that seared my retinas. I reached out, my hand shaking uncontrollably, and grasped the diploma cover. "Congratulations," the dean said. I nodded. I tried to say thank you, but my tongue felt swollen. I turned to face the audience for the official photo. Flash, flash. I took one step toward the stairs. Then the floor disappeared. It wasn't a slow fade. It was a sudden, violent cut to black. I didn't feel the impact. I didn't feel my shoulders strike the hardwood or my graduation cap tumble off my head. The last thing I registered was the collective gasp of 5,000 people, a sound that sucked the air out of the room. Consciousness returned in jagged shards. There was a voice, loud and urgent, a hand pressing against my wrist, the smell of rubbing alcohol and dust. "Can you hear me? Stella? Can you squeeze my hand?" I opened my eyes. The arena ceiling was spinning. A face hovered above me. A woman in an EMT uniform. She looked terrified. I tried to sit up, but my body refused to obey. My limbs felt like they were buried in sand. "Stay down, honey," the EMT said. "You took a hard fall. We are going to get you on the stretcher." I tried to speak. I wanted to ask about my grandfather. I wanted to know if I had torn my dress. But all that came out was a dry rasp. "We need to contact her family." A second voice said. It was a man, standing somewhere near my feet. "Does she have a phone?" I checked her bag. The woman said, "It is locked, but there is a form here in the side pocket. Emergency contact information." I frowned. I didn't remember putting a form in my bag. I had my wallet, my lipstick, my phone, and my planner. I hadn't filled out a physical emergency contact form since I started the program 2 years ago. The man started reading. Primary contacts. Gordon and Marla Bailey. Parents. No. I whispered. The word was barely a breath. He didn't hear me. He was already reciting the numbers. I listened as he read them out loud. They were the correct numbers. But something was wrong. The image of the form in my mind, I couldn't place it. And then, as they lifted me onto the gurney and the world tilted sideways, I saw the paper in the EMT's hand. It was a white index card. The handwriting on it was looped and decorative, written in purple ink. I write in black gel pen, always, and my handwriting is a jagged, hurried scrawl. That was my mother's handwriting. When had she put that in my bag? I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks. The questions swirled in my muddy brain. but the exhaustion pulled me back under. The lights of the arena faded, replaced by the interior of the ambulance. And then the rhythmic thumping of tires on pavement. The hospital emergency department was a hive of controlled chaos. Beeping monitors, the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum, the murmur of conversations I couldn't understand. I was in a curtained bay, hooked up to machines that chirped every few seconds. A doctor stood at the foot of the bed, looking at a clipboard. He was young, tired, and efficient. "Ms. Bailey, you are awake," he said, not looking up. "I am Dr. Evans. We are running some labs. Your blood pressure is very low, and your heart rate is irregular. We need to get a full family history to rule out some genetic factors." I nodded weakly. My throat felt like sandpaper. "We have been trying to reach your parents," he said, "the numbers provided on your sheet." I closed my eyes. "Did they answer no?" he said. "We left voicemails. Then we tried again 10 minutes ago. We got a text response from the mother's number. A text response. To a hospital." "What did it say?" I asked. He hesitated. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, with a flash of pity that made my stomach turn. It said, "We are out of town. Please handle standard care." The room went silent. The beep of the monitor seemed to get louder. "Running late, save us seats." That was the text they had sent 2 hours ago. Now they were out of town. They were not out of town. They were avoiding a scene. They were avoiding the messiness of a daughter who collapsed in public. If they came to the hospital, they would have to sit in uncomfortable chairs. They would have to answer questions. They would have to be parents, rather than props in a success story. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady, surprisingly cold. "Is there anyone else we can call, doctor?" Evans asked. Before I could answer, the curtain swept back. "I am her grandfather," a voice said, "and I am not leaving." Walter stood there. He looked smaller in the fluorescent light of the hospital. His suit jacket slightly oversized, but his posture was iron. He was holding a plastic bag from the hospital gift shop. He looked at the doctor, then at the nurse standing by the computer. "I am Walter Davis. I am her grandfather. I was at the graduation. I followed the ambulance." The nurse, a stern woman with graying hair, looked at him. "Sir, usually we limit visitors to, she needs her glasses." Walter interrupted gently. He walked past the nurse and approached the bed. He reached into the plastic bag and pulled out my glasses case, my phone charger, and my black leather planner. "I found your bag with the security guard at the arena. I told him I wouldn't leave without it." He placed the items on the tray table. Then he looked at me. His eyes were watery, but his hand, when he placed it over mine, was warm and dry. "You gave us a scare, kiddo," he said. I gripped his hand. "Grandpa, Mom and Dad." "I know," he said. He cut me off, sparing me the humiliation of saying it out loud. "I know. Stella, don't worry about them right now. You look at me." He turned to the doctor. "I can answer the family history questions. I know the mother's side back 3 generations. I don't know the father's side as well. But I know enough, doctor." Evans looked from Walter to me, then nodded. "Okay, let's start there." For the next 20 minutes, Walter recited medical history with the precision of a historian. He knew about my grandmother's thyroid issues. He knew about the heart murmur my uncle had. He knew things I didn't even know. He spoke to the doctor with a quiet authority, refusing to let them treat me as a statistic. He wasn't frantic. He was steady. He was the anchor. When the doctor left to order more tests, Walter sat in the chair next to the bed. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't pull out a magazine. He just sat there, watching the rise and fall of my chest. "Why aren't they here?" I asked. The question leaked out of me, pathetic and small. Walter sighed. He rubbed a thumb over the face of his watch. "Marla and Gordon, they don't do well with reality. Stella, they like the highlight reel. This," he gestured to the IV stand, "the monitors, the pale hospital sheets. This is too real for them." It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said about my parents, doctor. Evans returned an hour later. His expression had shifted from efficient to concerned. "Stella, We got the initial blood work back, he said. He pulled a rolling stool over and sat down. This isn't just burnout or dehydration. Your inflammatory markers are through the roof, and your electrolyte balance is critically off in a way that suggests kidney stress. Plus, the EKG shows a prolonged QT interval. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means we are looking at a potential autoimmune condition, possibly something like lupus or Addison's, complicated by a cardiac arrhythmia. We need to do an MRI and a more comprehensive cardiac workup immediately. You are going to be admitted. The words washed over me. Autoimmune. Cardiac. Admitted. I had a job interview on Tuesday. I had a lease renewal to sign. I had a life that required me to be vertical and functional. I can't stay. I said, panic rising. I have to work. You are not going to work, Walter said. His voice was soft but absolute. You are staying right here. A woman in a blazer walked into the bay. She held a tablet and looked apologetic. Ms. Bailey. I am Sarah. From patient administration. We are processing your admission, but we have a slight flag on the file. She looked at Walter, then back at me. We just received a digital upload to your patient portal regarding decision-maker status and billing authorization. She said, it came in about 20 minutes ago. I frowned. I didn't upload anything. I have been lying here. The administrator nodded. That is why I'm asking. The timestamp shows it was uploaded while you were likely in the ambulance or just arriving. It is a healthcare power of attorney and a billing assignment form. It designates Gordon and Marla Bailey as primary decision-makers for all medical and financial matters related to your care. Effective immediately. The air left the room. Can I see that? I asked. She turned the tablet toward me. There it was. A standard hospital form, filled out in digital text, and at the bottom, a signature. Stella J. Bailey. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the S, the same sharp cross on the T. To a stranger. It was perfect, but I knew how I signed my middle initial. I always connected the J to the B. This signature had a gap, and more importantly, I had been unconscious when this was signed. Who sent this? Walter asked. His voice had dropped an octave. It was a dangerous sound. It was uploaded through the patient portal using Ms. Bailey's login credentials. The administrator said, so technically, it came from her. But given the timing, I looked at Walter. His face had gone pale. His jaw set hard. He knew. He looked at the signature, then he looked at me. And I saw the realization hit him. Someone had my passwords. Someone had logged in while I was passed out on a stretcher. Someone was trying to lock down control of my medical decisions and my billing before I even woke up enough to speak for myself. And that someone was the same people who were out of town. They didn't come to hold my hand. They logged in to secure their authority. I need you to freeze that. I told the administrator. My hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't from the fever. It was from a cold, sharp rage. I did not sign that. The administrator tapped the screen. I will note it as contested, but without a new directive, she can sign a new one right now. Walter said. He stood up. Bring the papers. I am the witness. As the administrator hurried away to get the forms, I sank back against the pillows. The hospital sounds faded into the background. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. My parents weren't just absent, they were active. They were doing something behind the scenes, something that required them to legally pretend they were in charge of me while physically staying miles away. I looked at the planner Walter had placed on the table. My life was in there, my schedule, my deadlines, my carefully constructed existence, and suddenly, I felt like none of it belonged to me. Walter sat back down. He didn't say everything is going to be okay. He didn't offer platitudes. He reached out and adjusted the blanket over my feet, tucking the corner in tight. We are going to fix this. Stella, he said. I looked at him. The only person in the room who saw me. I think they did this. Grandpa, I whispered. I think they forged it. Walter looked at the door where the administrator had exited, his eyes narrowing. I know, he said, and we are going to find out why. The monitor beeped steadily. a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos unraveling in my mind. I was sick. I was alone in a way I hadn't understood until this morning. But as I watched my grandfather pull his chair closer, planting himself between me and the door like a guard dog, I knew one thing for certain. The collapse was just the beginning. The real fall was yet to come. The nurse returned to start a new IV line. I winced as the needle pierced my skin, but the pain was grounding. It focused me. "I need my phone," I said to Walter. He handed it to me. The screen was cracked in the corner from the fall. I unlocked it and went to my call log. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I opened my email. I refreshed the inbox. Nothing. Then I checked the sent folder. Nothing. I went to the trash folder. There it was. A confirmation email from the hospital patient portal document upload. Successful durable power of attorney. Timestamp. 10:42 a.m. I had been in the ambulance at 10:42 a.m. I clicked on the details. The IP address of the device that uploaded it wasn't my phone. It was a desktop computer. I looked up at Walter. They did it from a computer. I said, "Which means they aren't on the road. They are at home, or somewhere with a desktop." Walter nodded slowly. "Marla doesn't travel without her laptop. But she wouldn't use hotel Wi-Fi for banking or sensitive docs. She's paranoid about hackers." The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. She was paranoid about hackers, yet she had just hacked her own daughter. "I need to see the other documents." I said, "If they uploaded that, what else did they touch?" The administrator came back in with a clipboard and a fresh stack of paper. "Mr. Davis, Mrs. Bailey, these are the revocation forms for the previous directive. And a new designation form." I took the pen. My hand was still weak, but I forced the ink onto the page. I wrote Walter Davis in the line for primary agent. I hesitated at the alternate agent line. "Put Jenna," Walter suggested. "She's the only friend you have who wouldn't be intimidated by Marla." Jenna Hart, my college roommate, the one person who had told me years ago that my parents' behavior wasn't normal. I hadn't listened then. I wrote her name down now. I signed the bottom of the page. Stella J. Bailey. I made sure the J connected to the B. "There," I said, handing the clipboard back. "That is my signature. The other one is a fraud." The administrator looked uncomfortable. "We will file this immediately. It supersedes the previous upload. However," she paused, "since the previous document was used to verify insurance billing, we might have to rerun the eligibility check." "Do it," I said. She nodded and left. I lay back, the adrenaline fading, leaving me hollowed out. "Grandpa," I said. "Yeah." "Kid, why did you come today?" I asked. "Really?" Walter looked down at his hands. They were spotted with age, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. "Your father called me last night," he said. "Gordon called you?" Walter nodded. "He told me they were so proud of you. He told me about the dinner they had planned. He told me how great everything was going." "And so," Walter said, looking up at me, he used the past tense. He said, "We were so proud." He said, "It was a great plan." I frowned. Before it even happened, exactly. Walter's expression was grim. It was subtle. "But I know your father. He talks in past tense when he's already written the story off." I hung up the phone, and I got a bad feeling. I thought, they aren't going. And if they aren't going, my granddaughter is going to be standing there alone. He reached out and patted my leg. I couldn't let that happen. "Stella, not again." I closed my eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. He had driven an hour based on a pronoun. He had deciphered their neglect before I had even realized it was happening. "I am scared. Grandpa," I whispered, "not just about the sickness, about them." Walter leaned forward. The look in his eyes was fierce, a spark of the man who had worked 40 years in a steel mill to build a life for a family that didn't appreciate him. "Let them try to come through that door," he said. "Just let them try." As the drugs the doctor had ordered began to drip into my veins, pulling me toward sleep, I held on to that image. My grandfather, sitting in a plastic chair, guarding the gate, the only wall between me and the people who were supposed to love me. The last thing I saw before I drifted off was the digital clock on the wall. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My graduation lunch was supposed to be starting right now, somewhere, in a restaurant I would never see. My parents were probably ordering champagne, toasting to a success they hadn't witnessed, while signing my name to papers that would bind me to them in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But they had made one mistake. They thought I was alone. They forgot about Walter. And as I fell asleep, I realized something else. They forgot that I was a Bailey, too. And if there was one thing a Bailey knew how to do, it was survive the wreckage. I would wake up, and when I did, I would find out what they were hiding, even if it broke me, even if it broke us all. The second time I woke up, the world was sharper. The edges of the room defined by a brutal, fluorescent clarity. The hazy, drug-induced softness of the previous hour had evaporated, leaving behind a pounding headache and a thirst that felt like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I shifted my legs. They felt heavy, sluggish, but they were mine again. The rhythmic whoosh-click of the IV pump was the only sound in the room. Walter was still there. He had moved his plastic chair to the corner of the room to charge his phone. His long legs stretched out in front of him, crossed at the ankles. He was watching me. "You are back with us," he said. It wasn't a question. I pushed myself up on my elbows, fighting the wave of dizziness that threatened to pull me back down. "I need to see it. Grandpa." He didn't pretend not to know what I was talking about. He didn't tell me to rest or wait for the doctor. He simply unplugged his phone, stood up, and walked over to the bedside table where the hospital tablet sat, docked in its charging station. He handed it to me. The screen was already on the patient portal homepage. I tapped the Documents tab with a finger that felt too thick for the glass. The file was at the top of the list, flagged with a yellow icon that indicated pending verification. Durable power of attorney. Healthcare financial assignment. Uploaded today, 10:42 a.m. I opened the file. It was a standard state template, the kind you can download for $20 from a legal website. I scrolled down. The clauses were boilerplate, granting broad, sweeping powers to make medical decisions, access medical records, and crucially handle billing and insurance claims. My eyes snagged on the names: Primary Agent Gordon Bailey, Secondary Agent Marla Bailey, Alternate Agent in case of unavailability of Primary and Secondary Walter Davis. They had listed him. They had thrown him a bone, burying his name at the bottom of the list, a powerless backup to their absolute authority. It was a calculated insult, but it was also a strategic move. By including him, they made the document look more legitimate, more inclusive of the whole family. Then I looked at the signature block. It was dated today, at 10:42 in the morning. I had been strapped to a gurney in the back of an ambulance, staring at the ceiling and trying to remember my own name. I had not been sitting at a computer. I had not been holding a pen. The signature was a digital image pasted onto the line. Stella J. Bailey. I zoomed in. The pixels were slightly fuzzy around the edges, suggesting it had been lifted from another document, perhaps scanned and cropped. It was my signature, or at least, it was a version of it, but it was an old version. I could tell by the loop of the B. I used to loop the bottom of the B when I was in my 20s. A flourish I had dropped 5 years ago when I started signing hundreds of invoices a week at work. This signature was a ghost from the past. I looked up at Walter. They pasted it. I said, my voice was raspy. They took an old scan and they pasted it on. Walter nodded, his face unreadable. That is what I thought. It is a forgery. Stella. A clumsy one, but effective enough to get past a tired hospital clerk. I handed the tablet back to him, my hands trembling. Why, I asked. Why would they do this if they wanted to make decisions for me? Why not just come here? Why not just show up and be my parents? Walter set the tablet down. Because if they come here, they lose control of the narrative, he said. If they are here, they have to answer questions. They have to see you sick. If they do it from a distance, with a piece of paper, they can manage the situation without getting their hands dirty. They can control the insurance. the doctors, and the information flow, all from their living room. He walked to the door and looked out into the hallway. "I am not letting this slide," he said quietly. He walked back to the bed and pressed the call button. When the nurse appeared, a different one this time, a young man with a kind face, Walter spoke with a calm, terrifying precision. "We need to see the patient advocate," Walter said, "and the social worker, immediately." The nurse looked at the monitors, then at me. "Is everything okay? Is she in pain?" "She is fine," Walter said. "But we have a legal discrepancy regarding her consent forms, and until it is resolved, no one, and I mean no one, is to take any direction from Gordon or Marla Bailey. No non-emergency procedures, no release of information. Is that clear?" The nurse blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden steel in the old man's voice. I will get the charge nurse and the social worker, sir." As the nurse hurried away, my phone buzzed on the tray table. I looked at the screen, a picture of my parents, smiling on a sailboat they had rented for an hour just to take the photo, lit up the glass. It was them. My stomach lurched. Part of me, the part that was still 5 years old and waiting for them to pick me up from school, wanted to answer and hear them say they were on their way, wanted to hear them say they were worried. "Answer it," Walter said. "Put it on speaker." I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello," I said. Stella Marla's voice filled the room. It was high, breathless, the tone she used when she was performing for an audience. "Oh my God. Honey, we have been worried sick. We got a call from a doctor." He sounded very dramatic. I looked at Walter. He was staring at the phone with a look of profound distaste. I collapsed. "Mom," I said. "I passed out on stage." I know, Marla said, dismissing the event as if it were a spilled drink. "We heard it was just heat exhaustion. You always did forget to drink water. Remember that time at the zoo?" She was rewriting history in real time, minimizing, deflecting. "Mom, I am in the hospital," I said. "They are running tests for heart failure and autoimmune disease." There was a pause on the line, a beat of silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. "Well, don't let them scare you." Gordon's voice chimed in. He must have been on an extension or listening close to the phone. "Hospitals love to run up the bill, Stella. They love to find things that aren't there." I closed my eyes. They weren't asking how I felt. They weren't asking if I was in pain. Gordon cleared his throat. "Listen, honey, the reason we are calling, did you sign anything?" The question hung in the air, sharp and cold. What I asked, "Did you sign any admission papers?" Gordon asked, "or anything regarding insurance? We don't want them messing up the billing. You know how complicated the family trust setup is. If you sign the wrong thing, it could trigger a whole audit." My hand tightened around the phone. "I didn't sign anything." "Dad," I said, "I was unconscious." "Good," Gordon said. The relief in his voice was palpable. "That is good. We handled it for you. We sent over a form to make sure we could manage the administrative side. We didn't want you to have to worry about paperwork while you are resting. You forged my signature." I said. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of calculation. "Don't be dramatic, Stella," Marla said, her voice dropping the cheerful facade. "We didn't forge anything. We used a signature on file. It is a standard proxy procedure. We are trying to help you. We are trying to protect you from making a financial mistake. A financial mistake, not a medical crisis. A financial one." "Why aren't you here?" I asked. The question that mattered. "Honey, we told you," Marla said. "We are out of town. The reception is terrible. And honestly, if we come down there, it just causes a scene. You know how I get in hospitals. I would just be in the way. We will be there as soon as we can," Gordon added. His tone clipped. "But right now, we need you to just relax. Don't sign anything. Tell the doctors to talk to us. We will handle the insurance. Just rest." The line clicked dead. They hung up. I stared at the phone. They hadn't asked a single question about my symptoms. They hadn't asked if I was scared. They had checked the box on the paperwork and ended the call. Walter reached over and took the phone from my hand. He set it down on the table, face down. I am sorry. Stella, he said softly. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, a hardening of the soft places where I had kept hoping they would change. They are worried about the insurance, I said. Why Walter didn't answer immediately. He picked up my phone again and flipped it over. Unlock it, he said. I did. Look at your missed calls, he said. Not your parents, the others. I scrolled down. I had been so focused on my parents that I hadn't looked closely at the other notifications. There were 4 missed calls from a number labeled Compliance Department and 3 emails. I opened the email app. The most recent message was from a sender I didn't recognize. Claims-verification meridian-health.com. Subject urgent eligibility verification required for Stella Bailey. I tapped it open. Dear Ms. Bailey, we are attempting to process your admission, but we have encountered a discrepancy regarding your coverage under the Bailey Family Group Plan. Our records indicate a status change effective 14 days ago. Please contact us immediately to avoid denial of services. 14 days ago, 2 weeks before I collapsed. I looked at Walter. My coverage changed. The door opened. A woman with a kind, weary face walked in, holding a heavy folder. She wore a badge that read, Helen Higgins, social worker. Mr. Davis, Miss. Bailey, she asked. Yes, Walter said, standing up. I am Helen. The charge nurse told me there is a concern about a power of attorney document. There is, Walter said, but I think there is something else, too. Helen nodded. She pulled a chair close to the bed. I was actually coming to see you anyway. Ms. Bailey, I spoke with the billing coordinator on my way up. We have a bit of a mystery. She opened the folder. You are listed as a dependent on your parents' policy. Correct, she asked. Yes, I said. I have been on it since I was 26. They have a family business plan. They insisted I stay on it because it was better coverage than what my job offered, and it was cheaper for them to keep me as a dependent employee than to remove me. Helen pursed her lips. Right, that is what the file says. But when we ran the admission check 2 hours ago, the system flagged a lapse. A lapse, I asked. According to the insurer, you were removed from the active employee roster 2 weeks ago. She said, and this is the strange part, the policy itself wasn't canceled. Your status was just changed from active to archive/hold. I stared at her. What does that mean? It usually happens when an employee is terminated or leaves a company, Helen explained. But here's the catch. Even though you were removed, claims were still being submitted under your ID number for pharmacy prescriptions. Prescriptions? I asked. I haven't picked up a prescription in 6 months. Helen looked at the paper. These weren't for you. Likely. Sometimes. If the primary policyholder has multiple dependents, the routing gets confused. But the issue is, right now, the hospital is showing you as uninsured for inpatient care. Uninsured. The word hung in the room like a threat. An inpatient stay with an MRI and cardiac monitoring could cost $30,000, maybe more. I felt the panic rising again. My parents told me I was covered. They told me not to worry about the paperwork. We handle the paperwork. Stella, it is cheaper this way. I looked at Walter. His face was grim. They took her off the policy, Walter said. 2 weeks ago. It looks that way, Helen said. Or at least, they changed her classification so that major claims wouldn't go through. But maybe they kept the account open for something else. Why would they do that, I asked. Walter looked at me. Because if you are an active employee on their business plan, Stella, the premiums are higher. If they were having cash flow problems, maybe they dropped you to save a few $1,000s for the quarter. They probably thought they could add you back on later before you noticed. They gambled, I whispered. They gambled that I wouldn't get sick, and they lost. Walter said, and now they are trying to cover their tracks. That is why they wanted the power of attorney. If they control the billing, they can maybe intercept the denial letters before you see them. They can hide the lapse. Helen listened to this exchange with a professional detachment. but I saw the sympathy in her eyes. "Ms. Bailey," she said gently, "if you suspect that your parents are not acting in your best interest, we need to secure your decision-making rights immediately. The document they uploaded, if you say you didn't sign it, that is fraud. I didn't sign it," I said. My voice was stronger now. "Okay," Helen said. "I'm going to flag the file. We will reject that document. You need to sign a new directive. Who do you want to appoint?" I looked at Walter. "Him," I said, "Walter Davis. And I need a backup, just in case." Helen said, "Jenna Hart." I said, "I will give you her number." Helen wrote it down. "One more thing," she said. "I noticed something on your demographics page. You might want to check it. What I asked. Your contact information." She said, "The email address for notifications." I grabbed the tablet again. I went to the profile section. Name Stella J. Bailey address, 402 Maple Street. Apartment 4B, my correct address. Phone, my correct number. Email, spaley.notifications@gmail.com. I stared at it. My email was spaley.notification@gmail.com. Singular. No S at the end. This email had an S. It was a subtle, almost invisible change. If you glanced at it quickly, you would never notice. But it wasn't my email. It was a dummy account. They changed the email. I said, "They created a fake address that looks like mine. That explains why you didn't get the insurance warnings." Helen said, "The digital correspondence was going to the fake account." I felt sick. This wasn't just negligence. This was architecture. They had built a structure to keep me blind. Walter stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out at the parking lot. "They have been doing this for a long time." "Stella," he said. He didn't turn around. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, this isn't a panic reaction to you fainting," he said. "You don't set up fake email accounts and forge signatures in an hour. They have been managing you like an asset for years." He turned to face me. "You know why I never liked them paying for your car insurance or keeping you on their phone plan because you are independent." I said, "Because you think people should pay their own way." "No," Walter said, "because I know them, Marla and Gordon. They don't give gifts. They buy leverage. They treat you like an extension of their image. When you are doing well, when you are the successful grad student, they own that. But the minute you become a liability, the minute you cost them money or embarrassment," he gestured to the empty room, "they disappear. Or worse, they try to mitigate the damage to themselves." I thought about the graduation, the text message. "Save us seats." They wanted the credit of being there without the effort of attending. I thought about the insurance. It is cheaper this way. Cheaper for whom Helen stood up. "I am going to process the new directive. Mr. Davis is your primary decision-maker. We will remove your parents from the authorized list. I will also put a password on your account. No one gets information without the code word." "Thank you," I said. Helen paused at the door. "There is one more thing," she said. "I wasn't going to mention it, but given everything you have said." She hesitated. "A nurse on the floor took a call about 30 minutes ago," she said. "A woman claiming to be your mother." I stiffened. "What did she say?" "She didn't ask about your test results." Helen said, "She asked the nurse for a timeline on when you would be lucid enough to sign legal documents. She specifically asked if your hand steadiness had returned." I felt the blood drain from my face. She asked if I could hold a pen. Helen nodded. It struck the nurse as odd. "Usually, mothers ask if their daughters are in pain." "I understand," Walter said. His voice was like grinding stones. "Thank you." "Helen." When the door closed, the silence in the room was heavy. "They need a signature," I said. "A real one. The forgery wasn't good enough, or they know it won't hold up if the hospital looks too closely. They need me to sign something else, probably a retroactive reinstatement of the insurance," Walter said, "or a waiver releasing them from liability, or a loan document to cover the bills they know are coming." He walked over to the bed and sat down. He looked tired. The lines on his face seemed deeper than they had this morning. "I am sorry, Stella," he said again. "Don't be," I said. I reached out and took his hand. His skin was rough, calloused from years of working in his woodshop. It was the only real thing in the world. "You came," I said. "That is all that matters." Walter squeezed my hand. "I will always come." I looked at the tablet, at the new directive Helen had left on the screen for me to review. Primary Agent Walter Davis. It was the first time in my life I had officially, legally chosen someone other than my parents to care for me. It felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was severing a limb. But then I remembered the text message. "We are out of town." I remembered the fake email address. I remembered the question about my hand steadiness. They had severed the limb years ago. I was just finally looking at the wound. I signed the new document, Stella J. Bailey. I connected the J to the B. I handed the tablet to Walter. "It is done," I said. Walter looked at the screen, then at me. "Okay," he said. "Now we focus on getting you well. And while you do that..." He looked at his watch, the old silver one. "I'm going to start digging," he said. "If they changed your insurance and your email, I want to know what else they changed." I nodded. My head was still throbbing, and the monitors were still beeping. But for the first time since I hit the floor at the arena, I didn't feel like I was falling. I was on the ground. The ground was hard and cold, and it hurt, but at least I knew where I stood, and I wasn't standing alone. The next 3 days were a blur of saline drips, the hum of the MRI machine, and the distinct, antiseptic boredom of hospital confinement. My body was slowly knitting itself back together. The doctors had confirmed the initial fears I had a condition called Addison's disease, compounded by a severe electrolyte imbalance that had sent my heart into a dangerous rhythm. It was manageable, they said. With steroids and monitoring, I would be fine. But while my adrenal glands were the medical cause of my collapse, they were not the reason I felt like I was suffocating. I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by flowers sent by coworkers who had heard the news, but didn't know the truth. And I treated my recovery like a forensic audit. I asked Walter to bring me a fresh notebook from the gift shop. I started documenting everything. Every nurse who entered the room, every time my phone rang, every time the insurance coordinator stopped by with a furrowed brow. I logged the timestamps. I took screenshots of my call history. I was building a timeline, not because I wanted to sue anyone, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. My parents had tried to tell me I was confused. They had tried to tell the hospital I was incompetent. I needed hard data to anchor me to reality. On the morning of the 4th day, Walter came in carrying a canvas tote bag instead of his usual plastic sack. He looked weary. He had been sleeping in the guest chair or driving back and forth to his small house 40 minutes away, refusing to leave me alone for more than a few hours. He pulled up a chair and set the tote bag on his lap. "I found something at the house." "Stella," he said. He reached into the bag and pulled out a manila folder. It was thin, unassuming. "You know how your mail sometimes comes to my place?" he asked. "Because we have the same last name, and I am listed as a previous address on some of your old accounts." I nodded. It happened occasionally. Junk mail, mostly. Walter opened the folder. "I have been keeping these for about 6 months, he said. "I didn't want to worry you. You were so stressed with the graduate program and work. I thought it was just junk mail or clerical errors. I thought I would handle it later." He slid a piece of paper onto my tray table. It was a letter from a private lending institution called Apex Capital. The header was bold and red. "Final notice of default." I stared at it. I had never heard of Apex Capital. I read the text. "Dear customer, regarding your business line of credit ending in 4492, this is a final notification before we initiate collections proceedings. The outstanding balance of $12,000 is past due. $12,000. This isn't mine." I said, "I don't have a business line of credit. I have a student loan and a credit card I pay off every month." Walter didn't say anything. He just slid the next piece of paper across the tray. This one was stranger. It was a formal letter, printed on thick, cream-colored paper, but the logo looked like something made in a basic word processor. "To Bailey Family Holdings, attention, Stella J. Bailey, Managing Partner." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Bailey Family Holdings. I asked. What is that? I don't know, Walter said. But look at the address they are writing to. I looked at the window of the envelope he had stapled to the letter. P.O. Box, 892, Oak Creek Station. I knew that address. That is Mom and Dad's holiday card box. I said, my parents had maintained a P.O. box for as long as I could remember. They told me it was for security, so they didn't have to give out their home address to strangers or put it on return labels. It is safer. Stella, my mother had said, you never know who is watching. Walter nodded. It is, and this letter is addressed to you, as the managing partner of a company that receives mail at their box. I reached for my laptop. My hands were shaking, but the tremor was different now. It wasn't weakness. It was adrenaline. I am checking my credit report, I said. I logged into the credit monitoring site I hadn't checked in a year. I typed in my social security number, my date of birth, and answered the security questions. The wheel spun for a few seconds, then the dashboard loaded. My score, usually a pristine 780, was 620. I clicked on Open Accounts. There they were, Apex Capital, small business line of credit, opened 18 months ago, balance $12,400, status past due, Midland Auto Finance, refinance loan, opened 10 months ago, balance $28,000. I clicked on the details for the auto loan. It was for a vehicle I didn't recognize, a luxury SUV. I don't own an SUV. I whispered, I drive a 5-year-old sedan that is fully paid off. I scrolled down to the personal information section of the report. Under Employer, it listed Bailey Family Holdings. Under Current Address, it listed P.O. Box, 892, Oak Creek Station. I sat back against the pillows, the air leaving my lungs. They opened a business in my name, I said. They made me the partner. And then they took out loans against it. Walter rubbed his face with his hand. The friction sounded like sandpaper on dry wood. I loaned them money. Stella, he said quietly. I looked at him. When about 2 years ago, he said, just before this account was opened, Gordon came to me. He said they were having a liquidity issue with one of his ventures, a bridge period. He called it. He needed $15,000. I gave it to him. He looked out the window, shame written in the set of his jaw. They never paid me back. He said, every time I asked, they had a new excuse. The market was down. The liquidity was still locked up. I knew they were juggling money. I knew they were living beyond their means, but I didn't think. He looked back at me, his eyes wet. I didn't think they would eat their own young. I looked at the screen again. The total debt was over $40,000, and that was just what was reported here. This is why they didn't come, I said. My voice sounded flat, detached. It wasn't about the hospital. It wasn't about the graduation. They were afraid that if I died, or if I got sick enough that someone looked into my finances, this would all come out. Or, Walter said, his voice hardening, they were hoping you would stay groggy long enough for them to fix it. That is why they wanted the power of attorney. If they control your finances, they can hide the default notices. They can intercept the calls. I closed the laptop. I need to call them. I said, not on the phone. Walter said, video. I want to see their faces. I picked up my phone. I saw that I had texts from Marla. Hope you are resting. We are sending good vibes. I hit the FaceTime button. It rang and rang. Then the screen connected. Marla's face filled the frame. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf. The background was blurry, but I could see blue sky and the edge of a white umbrella. Stella, she cried, you look so much better. Doesn't she look better? Gordon leaned into the frame. He was wearing a polo shirt and holding a drink that looked like iced tea, or maybe scotch. You look tired. Honey, Gordon said, you need to sleep. Why are you on the phone? Where are you? I asked. Oh, just a little spot we found near the coast, Marla said vaguely. We needed to decompress. The stress of your episode really took a toll on us. Stella, we were so worried. The narcissism was breathtaking. They were at the beach, decompressing from the stress of my heart failure, while I was sitting in a hospital bed reading about the $40,000 they had stolen from me. I need to ask you something. I said. Shoot, Gordon said. But make it quick. We have a reservation for lunch. I held up the letter from Apex Capital. I held it right up to the camera lens so they could see the red logo. What is Bailey Family Holdings? I asked. The reaction was instantaneous. Marla stopped smiling. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked at Gordon. Gordon didn't flinch, but his eyes went dead. The jovial father mask slipped, revealing the cold calculator underneath. Where did you get that? Gordon asked. His voice was no longer casual. It came to Grandpa's house, I said, along with a default notice for a $12,000 credit line I never opened, and a car loan for a car I have never driven. Marla laughed. A high, brittle sound. Oh, Stella. You are confused. This is exactly what the doctor said would happen. The medication makes you paranoid. That is just some junk mail. It is on my credit report. Mom, I said, I just pulled it. It lists me as the managing partner. It uses your P.O. box as the address. Gordon leaned closer to the phone. Listen to me. Stella, you don't understand how complex these things are. We put your name on a few documents for estate planning purposes. It is a tax strategy. It is to build your credit. We are doing you a favor. A favor, I repeated. You defaulted. You ruined my credit score. And you didn't tell me. We were going to pay it off next month, Marla blurted out. We had a deal closing. It was just a timing issue. So you admit it, I said. Gordon glared at Marla, silencing her with a look. We admit that we manage the family finances, Gordon said smoothly, and since you are part of this family, sometimes your name is used to leverage assets that benefit everyone. You will inherit all of this one day. Stella, you should be thanking us for building a portfolio. I felt a heat rising in my chest, a mixture of rage and grief so potent it made my visions swim. They weren't sorry. They were annoyed that I had caught them. I have one question, I said. And I want the truth. I looked directly into the camera lens. Did you sign that hospital document, the power of attorney that was uploaded while I was unconscious? Did you forge my signature silence? The wind blew into their microphone, creating a static distortion. Marla looked down at her lap. Gordon stared at me, his jaw working. They knew that admitting to the financial fraud was one thing that was civil. That was money. But forging a medical document during a health crisis, that was criminal. That was something you couldn't spin as a tax strategy. Finally, Marla looked up. Her eyes were wet, but the tears felt rehearsed. We did what we had to do to protect you, she said. There it was. The admission. You were incapacitated. Stella, Gordon added quickly, we needed to make sure we could make decisions. If we hadn't done that, the hospital could have done anything to you. We were protecting you. Protecting me, I said. Or protecting yourselves from being found out. We are your parents, Marla shouted, her voice cracking. We love you. You are being so ungrateful. We gave you everything, the graduate degree, the connections. I hung up. The screen went black. I sat there, breathing hard. The heart monitor on the wall was beeping faster. 110, 115. Walter reached over and put his hand on my shoulder. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. I looked at him. They admitted it. They did. Walter said, I looked at the door. I need to tell the hospital. Are you sure? Walter asked. Once you ring that bell. Stella, you can't unring it. If we report this to the administration, it becomes an official investigation. I looked at the stack of papers on my lap. I looked at the final notice. I thought about Marla's sunglasses and Gordon's iced tea. Ring it. I said, Helen Higgins, the patient advocate. Came back an hour later. She listened quietly as I explained what had happened. I didn't show her the financial documents that felt too personal, too messy, but I told her about the admission. They admitted to signing the upload. I said, they claimed it was for my protection, but they admitted I didn't sign it. Helen nodded. She was typing on her tablet. Thank you for telling me. Ms. Bailey, This confirms our suspicion. We are filing an internal incident report regarding the attempted unauthorized access to your medical records and decision-making. We will be permanently blocking that user account and flagging your file for high security. What does that mean for them, I asked. It means they cannot access your records, Helen said, and if they attempt to assert authority again, we will have documentation to refute it. As for the legal implications of the forgery itself, that is up to you. If you choose to pursue legal action, we can provide the audit logs. She stood up. You did the brave thing, she said. It is not easy to close the door on family. When she left, the room felt very large and very quiet. I had done it. I had officially declared my parents to be a threat to my safety. Walter stood up and stretched. You need to rest now, he said. But before you do, we need to talk about what happens when you get out of here. I can't go to my apartment, I said. They have a key. I know, Walter said, and I don't want you there alone. You are coming to my place. It is too far for you to drive me to appointments. I said, we will manage. He said, I have the guest room set up. It is quiet. No internet. Unless you use your phone. No cable TV. Just the birds and the wood shop. It sounded like heaven. And, Walter continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. I made a phone call while you were sleeping. He handed me the card. Elena Marsh, attorney at law, specializing in financial fraud and elder/medical abuse. She isn't cheap, Walter said, but she is the best. I used to make custom cabinets for her office back in the day. She owes me a favor or two, but I am paying her full rate because this matters. Grandpa, I can't ask you to pay for a lawyer. You aren't asking, Walter said firmly. I am offering. You are fighting a war on two fronts. Stella, your health and your finances. You can't fight the legal battle alone. I looked at the card. Elena Marsh. Do I really need a lawyer, I asked. Can't we just fix the credit report? Walter sat on the edge of the bed. Stella, listen to me. Your parents just admitted to identity theft and medical fraud. They are $40,000 in the hole in your name. Do you think they are just going to say oops and walk away? He leaned in closer. Gordon is cornered. Marla is panicked. People like that don't surrender. They escalate. I took the card. Okay, I said. Call her. Elena Marsh came to the hospital the next day. She was a small woman with sharp features and hair cut into a precise, angular bob. She wore a gray suit that looked like it could deflect bullets. She didn't bring flowers. She brought a legal pad and a voice recorder. She pulled the chair right up to the bed and looked at me with eyes that were intelligent and entirely unsentimental. Walter tells me you have a predator problem, she said. I winced. That is a harsh word. They are my parents. Predators are often parents. Elena said, it is the perfect camouflage. Now, tell me everything. Start with the graduation and end with the phone call. I talked for 40 minutes. I told her about the fainting, the text messages, the forged document, the fake email, the P.O. box, and the Bailey Family Holdings letter. Elena took notes in a shorthand I couldn't read. She didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She just nodded, occasionally circling something on her pad. When I finished, she capped her pen. Okay, she said. Here is the situation. You have a clear-cut case of identity theft and medical fraud. We can file police reports. We can dispute the debts with the credit bureaus. And we can sue for damages. But I asked. I could hear the but in her voice. But, Elena said, leaning back, the law is slow, and your parents are likely desperate. If they have leveraged your identity to this extent, they are relying on your credit to keep their own house of cards from falling. If you cut them off, their world collapses, so they will fight. I said, they will fight dirty. Elena corrected. And here is my biggest concern. She tapped the table with her pen. You collapsed. You have a diagnosis of a chronic illness that affects your adrenal function and heart. You were unconscious for a period of time. Yes, I said. If I were their lawyer, Elena said, and I wanted to maintain control of your assets, I wouldn't argue about the signature. I would argue that you are mentally or physically incapacitated. I stared at her. What I would file for guardianship. Elena said, I would claim that your medical condition has made you unstable. I would say that the confusion Marla mentioned on the phone is a symptom of your illness. I would argue that you are not competent to manage your own affairs, and therefore, for your own safety, the court should appoint your parents as your guardians. I felt cold. Guardianship. Like Britney Spears. Exactly. Elena said, "It is an extreme measure, but if they get it, they control everything. Your money, your medical decisions, your residence. They could force you to live with them. They could legally continue to use your credit because they would be the stewards of your estate. They wouldn't do that." I said, "That is insane." "Is it?" Elena asked. "They already forged a medical power of attorney while you were unconscious. That is one step away from guardianship. They already believe they own you." "Stella, guardianship just makes it legal." I looked at Walter. He looked sick. "So what do we do?" Walter asked. "We strike first," Elena said. "We don't wait for them to file. We document your capacity. We get affidavits from your doctors stating that you are lucid, competent, and fully capable of making decisions. We file the fraud reports immediately to establish a pattern of abuse." She looked at me. "You need to understand, Stella, this isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a race. If they file for emergency guardianship before we establish the fraud, you could be stuck in a legal limbo where they have temporary control over you while the courts sort it out." I thought about the compliance calls. I thought about the nurse saying my mother asked about my hand steadiness. They were asking if I could sign. I realized aloud, but maybe they were also checking to see if I was weak enough to be declared incompetent. Elena nodded. "Exactly." I felt a surge of fear, but it was followed by a strange, cold resolve. I had spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who made them look good, and all it had gotten me was a stolen identity and a hospital bed. "Draw up the papers," I said to Elena. She opened her briefcase. "I already have the drafts. We need to send cease and desist letters to the credit bureaus and the parents. We need to formally revoke any and all prior authorizations, and I need you to sign a retainer so I can speak for you." I took the pen. My hand was steady. I signed my name, Stella J. Bailey, the real one. 2 days later, I was discharged. Walter pulled his truck up to the hospital entrance. It was an old Ford, rusted around the wheel wells, but the engine purred. He helped me into the passenger seat and tucked a blanket around my legs. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "To your home," I corrected. "To home," he said simply. As we drove away from the city, watching the skyline fade in the rearview mirror, I felt a strange sense of dislocation. I was 33 years old, and I was moving back into my grandfather's spare room. I had a master's degree, a career, and $40,000 of secret debt. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification, not from the fake account I had secured my own. This was real. Subject petition for emergency intervention. My heart stopped. I opened it. It was a forwarded automated notice from the court system in our county. Elena had set up an alert on my name. A petition has been filed in the probate court regarding Stella J. Bailey, nature of filing. Temporary guardianship of person and estate. Petitioner Gordon and Marla Bailey. They had done it. Elena was right. They hadn't waited. They saw the walls closing in, and they had played their ace. I stared at the screen. The landscape outside the window strip malls, gas stations, trees blurred into a gray smear. "Grandpa," I said. "Yeah." "They filed." I said. "They filed for guardianship." Walter's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He didn't swerve. He didn't shout. He just kept the truck perfectly centered in the lane. When he asked, "Today," I said. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I asked. "How is that okay?" "Because now we know," Walter said. "We aren't guessing anymore. We aren't wondering if they are bad people or just desperate. We know. They declared war." He looked over at me, his eyes hard and clear. "And you know what happens when you declare war on a Bailey?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "You lose," he said. He reached over and turned on the radio. Old country music filled the cab. "Call Elena," he said. "Tell her to start the engines." I looked down at the phone. I looked at the names Gordon and Marla Bailey on the legal filing, the names of the people who had taught me to tie my shoes, the people who had bought me ice cream. I deleted the email notification. I dialed Elena's number. "I am ready." I told her when she answered. "Good," she said, "because the fight just started." I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. I was weak. I was tired. I was sick. But as the truck rolled onto the highway, putting miles between me and the life I thought I had, I realized something. They thought I was the same Stella who had fainted on the stage, the Stella who smiled for the photos and did what she was told, but that Stella had stayed on the floor. The Stella in the truck was someone else entirely, and she was done saving them a seat. Recovery did not feel like a triumph. It felt like a slow, humiliating retreat into a body I no longer trusted. My grandfather's house was a small, weathered bungalow tucked away on a gravel road, 40 minutes from the city and 1,000,000 miles from the life I had built. It smelled of sawdust, old coffee, and the lavender detergent he used to wash the sheets. For the first week, I spent most of my time in the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut slow, rhythmic circles in the air. In the movies, the heroine leaves the hospital with a steely glint in her eye, ready to burn down the world. In reality, I napped twice a day. I cried because I couldn't open a jar of pickles. I flinched when my phone buzzed. The fatigue of the Addison's crisis was a heavy, wet wool blanket that smothered my energy before I could even stand up. But the worst part wasn't the physical weakness. It was the shame. It sat in my gut, heavier than the nausea. How had I not seen it? I was an educated woman. I managed budgets at work. I had a master's degree. And yet, for years, I had let my parents treat me like a mindless extension of their own ego. I had let them handle the paperwork. I had let them keep me on their plan. I had accepted their excuses about P.O. boxes and tax strategies because I wanted, so desperately, to believe that they were taking care of me. I wanted to be the daughter who didn't cause problems, the daughter who was low maintenance, and because I had made myself so small, so easy to manage. They had felt comfortable stealing my life piece by piece. Elena Marsh did not believe in shame. She believed in documentation. She came to the house every other day, turning Walter's kitchen table into a war room. She was a striking contrast to the rustic setting her sharp gray suits and manicured nails against the scarred oak table and Walter's mismatched mugs. "We need to send the disputes today," Elena said on a Tuesday morning, sliding a stack of letters toward me. I picked up a pen. My hand was steadier than it had been at the hospital, but my signature still felt foreign. "These are for the credit bureaus," Elena explained. "We are formally disputing the Apex Capital line of credit and the Midland Auto loan as fraudulent. And these are for the hospital and the insurance company, demanding a full audit trail of every access point to your accounts in the last 6 months." I signed my name, Stella J. Bailey. "I hate this," I whispered. "I hate that I'm suing my own history." "You aren't suing your history," Elena said, not looking up from her laptop. "You are correcting the record. There is a difference." Walter was in the kitchen, making toast. He didn't say much during these sessions, but he was always there, hovering in the periphery like a sentry. He made sure my water glass was full. He made sure I took my mid-morning steroids. He was the silent, sturdy foundation upon which we were building this legal fortress. Around noon, Elena's phone rang. She answered it on speaker, placing it on the table between us. "This is Elena Marsh." She said, "Ms. Marsh, this is David Form, the fraud department at Meridian Health Insurance." A male voice said, "You asked us to pull the call logs for Stella Bailey's account." "Yes," Elena said. "What did you find?" "Well, we found the call where the policy status was altered to archive/hold. David said, "It took place 14 days ago. The caller identified herself as Stella Bailey. She provided the correct social security number, date of birth, and the answer to the security question, which was, name of first pet." I felt a chill. My first pet was a goldfish named Goldie. Everyone knew that. Okay, Elena said. And then, David continued, hesitation creeping into his voice. We listened to the recording. It doesn't sound like a 33-year-old woman. Play it, Elena said. There was a click, and then a hiss of static. Thank you for calling Meridian. How can I help you? Yes, hello. The voice that answered was smooth, melodic, and pitched slightly higher than natural. It was a voice designed to charm, a voice I had heard order wine in restaurants, charm headmasters, and lie to creditors. It was Marla. This is Stella Bailey, my mother said. Using my name with a terrifying ease, I need to make a status adjustment on my dependent file. I am moving to a different coverage tier. Just for a bridge period. Certainly. Ms. Bailey, can you verify your date of birth? July 12th, 1990, Marla said. She said my birthday. She said it with the same casual confidence she used to order a salad. She wasn't stumbling. She wasn't nervous. She was wearing my identity like a costume she had worn 1,000 times before. And your security answer, name of first pet Goldie. Marla cooed. A little goldfish. I squeezed my eyes shut. I felt sick. It wasn't just the fraud. It was the intimacy of it. She used the details of my childhood, the pet she had bought for me, to lock me out of my own health care. Stop it, I whispered. Elena tapped the screen, ending the call. The kitchen was silent. The only sound was the refrigerator humming. That is identity theft, Elena said, her voice devoid of emotion. Plain and simple. We have the recording now. We can prove it wasn't you. Walter walked over to the table. He looked old. She sounded happy, he said. She sounded like she was having a nice chat. That is Marla, I said, opening my eyes. If she believes the lie, it isn't a lie. She probably told herself she was helping me manage the premiums. She probably convinced herself she was the hero of that phone call. Elena packed up her laptop. This is good evidence, Stella. It proves they had access, intent, and the capability to impersonate you. It supports the narrative that the hospital document was also a fabrication. She looked at her watch. I have to run to the courthouse to file the motion for the protective order. I will be back tomorrow. Can you stay for lunch? Walter asked. I made soup. Elena hesitated, then softened. Just a quick bowl. Thank you. Walter. We sat there, the three of us, eating tomato soup in a silence that felt heavy but safe. I was just starting to feel like I could breathe again, like the ground under my feet was solidifying, and then we heard the gravel crunch. It wasn't the slow crunch of the mail truck. It was the aggressive, confident crunch of a heavy vehicle pulling into the driveway. Walter stood up and went to the window. Ah, hell, he said. Who is it? I asked, though I already knew. It is a Mercedes, Walter said. Silver, and they are getting out. I felt a spike of adrenaline so sharp it made my hands shake. I dropped my spoon. They are here, I asked. Elena stood up, wiping her mouth with a napkin. She didn't look alarmed. She looked interested. Don't open the door. Walter, Elena said. I'm not planning on it. Walter muttered. He walked to the front door and locked the deadbolt. He pulled the shade down. I heard footsteps on the wooden porch stairs. Click, clack, click, clack. Marla's heels. Knock, knock, knock. Walter Marla's voice sang out. We know you are in there. We see the truck. We brought lunch. I looked at the pot of soup on the table. They brought lunch. I repeated hysterically. They forged my medical records, destroyed my credit, and now they brought lunch. Stella Gordon's voice boomed. Honey, are you in there? We just want to see you. We have been worried sick. I looked at Elena. What do? I asked. You don't have to do anything. Elena said. You can sit right here. Walter can tell them to leave. I looked at the door. I could see their silhouettes through the frosted glass. If I didn't face them, I would never know. I would always wonder if there was some misunderstanding, some twisted logic I had missed. I needed to see them. I needed to see if they could look me in the eye. Let them in, I said. Stella, Walter warned. You are not strong enough. Yes, I am, I said. I stood up. I held onto the back of the chair for a moment to steady my legs. I am strong enough for this. Walter looked at Elena. She gave a small nod. Okay, Walter said, but they don't come past the porch. He unlocked the door and opened it. The sunlight flooded in, blindingly bright. Standing on the porch were my parents. They looked like they were dressed for a catalog photo shoot. Marla was wearing a cream-colored linen pantsuit and holding a large ceramic casserole dish covered in foil. Gordon was in a crisp blazer and jeans, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. They were smiling. It was a terrifying, plastered-on smile that didn't reach their eyes. There she is, Marla cried, stepping forward. Oh, my poor baby. You look so pale. She moved to hug me, but Walter stepped in front of her, blocking the doorway with his body. Back up, Marla, he said. Marla stopped, blinking. Walter, don't be silly. We brought a tuna casserole, Stella's favorite. I hate tuna casserole. I have hated it since I was 10. I stepped out from behind Walter. I didn't step onto the porch. I stayed in the doorway, using the frame for support. Why didn't you come to the hospital, I asked. It was the only question that mattered. Marla's smile faltered. Oh, honey, we told you. We were out of town. The signal was bad, and by the time we got the messages, stop lying, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the humid air. I saw the IP address on the document upload. It came from a desktop computer. You were home. Gordon stepped forward, shifting the flowers to his other arm. He looked annoyed, like a director dealing with an uncooperative actor. Stella, we are not going to discuss technicalities on a porch, he said. We had a situation. What situation, I asked. What situation is more important than your daughter having heart failure on a stage? Gordon sighed. He looked around the yard, as if checking for eavesdroppers. We couldn't risk being seen there, he said. The sentence hung in the air. I stared at him. You couldn't risk. Being seen, Gordon lowered his voice. We are in the middle of a delicate negotiation regarding a civil dispute. There are some aggressive parties involved, creditors, if our names appeared on a hospital admission record as guarantors, or if we were seen publicly at a major medical facility. It could have triggered a skip trace. It could have alerted them to our location and assets. I felt the blood drain from my face. So you didn't come because you were hiding from debt collectors, I asked. We were protecting the family assets, Marla interjected. If they freeze our accounts. Stella, we can't help you. We can't pay for your recovery. We were thinking of the long game. You aren't paying for my recovery. I said, my insurance is, or it would be, if you hadn't canceled it. Marla waved her hand dismissively. That was a clerical error. We were going to add you back on. We just needed to lower the headcount for the quarterly audit. I looked at them. They were monsters. They weren't evil in the way movie villains were evil. They were evil because they were entirely hollow. They would cannibalize their own child to save their credit rating, and then bring her a tuna casserole and call it love. Walter stepped out onto the porch. He was holding the manila folder. He threw it on top of the casserole dish Marla was holding. What is this? Marla asked. Open it, Walter said. Marla shifted the heavy dish to one arm and opened the folder. She saw the Apex Capital letter. She saw the auto loan. Her face went gray. Oh, she said, this. Yes, that, I said. You opened a business in my name. You took out loans, and you defaulted. Gordon looked at the papers over her shoulder. He didn't look ashamed. He looked caught. We were going to fix it, Marla said quickly. The deal is closing next month. We were going to pay off the line of credit before you ever knew. It was just a bridge. Stella. And the car, I asked? The $28,000 car. That is a company vehicle, Gordon said. For Bailey Family Holdings, we needed a car to meet clients. Your credit was available. It was a resource. Families use resources to help each other. For the family. Marla echoed. We did it for the family. I looked at Elena, who had quietly stepped into the doorway behind me. Elena Marsh stepped forward into the sunlight. For the family is not a legal defense against identity fraud. Mr. Bailey, she said, My parents froze. They looked at Elena, then at me, then back at Elena. They recognized the suit. They recognized the posture. This was not a family friend. "Who is this?" Gordon demanded. "I am Stella's attorney," Elena said, "and you have just admitted, in front of witnesses, to using your daughter's identity to secure credit without her consent. That is a federal crime." Gordon flinched. It was a visceral reaction, a physical recoil. The word crime hit him harder than my collapse had. Attorney Marla squeaked, "Stella, you got a lawyer against us. I didn't get a lawyer against you." I said, "I got a lawyer to protect myself. From you." "Stella," Gordon said, his voice taking on a desperate, menacing edge, "you are making a mistake. You are sick. You aren't thinking clearly. If you bring the law into this, you burn everything down. You destroy our reputation. You destroy your inheritance." "There is no inheritance," I shouted. My voice cracked. But I didn't care. "There is only debt. You spent it all. You spent my future before I even got there." Marla started to cry. It was the same performance I had seen 1,000 times. The victimhood, the tears. "We love you," she wailed. "We were trying to build an empire for you. And this is how you repay us, by hiring a stranger to attack us. Get off my porch." Walter said. Gordon looked at Walter. "You are poisoning her against us." "Walter, you always were jealous of our success." I said, "Get off my porch." Walter repeated. He took a step forward. He was 80 years old. But in that moment, he looked like he could tear a phone book in half. "Or the sheriff is the next call." Gordon glared at him. Then he grabbed Marla's arm. "Come on, Marla. She is obviously hysterical. We will handle this through proper channels." "Proper channels," Elena said smoothly. "I look forward to it." They turned and walked down the steps. Marla was still clutching the casserole dish, sobbing loudly. Gordon marched to the car, his shoulders stiff with rage. They got into the silver Mercedes. They slammed the doors. They reversed out of the driveway, gravel spitting from their tires, and sped away. I stood there, trembling. I felt a hand on my back. It was Walter. "You did good, kid," he said. I looked at the hydrangeas they had left on the porch railing. They were beautiful, vibrant blue. "Throw them out," I said. We went back inside. The adrenaline crash was instant and brutal. I sat at the table, my head in my hands, trying to slow my heart rate. "They really believe it." I said, "They really believe they did nothing wrong. That is what makes them dangerous." Elena said. She was writing notes on her legal pad. "They rationalize everything. In their minds. You are the villain for exposing them." Walter took the soup bowls to the sink. 30 minutes later, the mailman arrived. He walked up to the porch. Avoiding the spot where Gordon had stood, he knocked on the door. "Delivery for Stella Bailey," he called out. "Certified mail. Needs a signature." Walter opened the door and signed for it. He brought the envelope to the table. It was a thick white envelope with a green certified strip. The return address was a law firm in the city, Vanguard Associates. I looked at Elena. "Open it," she said. I tore the strip. I pulled out the stack of papers. Petition for temporary conservatorship. I read the first paragraph. In the matter of Stella J. Bailey, the petitioners, Gordon and Marla Bailey, allege that the respondent is medically compromised and temporarily incapacitated due to severe adrenal crisis and neurological distress. I skimmed down. Respondent has demonstrated erratic behavior, paranoia, and confusion regarding financial matters. Petitioners seek temporary authority over medical and financial decisions to ensure continuity of care and preservation of the respondent's estate. They didn't waste time, Elena said, reading over my shoulder. They served me. I said, "They came here with flowers and a casserole, acting like they just wanted to see me, while they knew this was in the mail. It is a strategic step," Elena said, her voice turning cold and professional. "It isn't full guardianship yet. It is a temporary order. They are arguing that you are in a medical crisis and can't make rational decisions. They are using your paranoia about the fraud as proof of your mental instability. They are saying I am crazy because I found out they stole from me." I said, "Exactly," Elena said. It is gaslighting weaponized into a legal strategy. If the judge grants this, they get control. They can fire me. They can dismiss the fraud disputes. They can silence you. I looked at the date on the petition. It was filed yesterday, the day after I confronted them on FaceTime. They were scared. Walter said, "They knew you were onto them. This is their nuclear option." I looked at the document. It was heavy in my hand. It felt like a cage. "I am not crazy," I said. "No, you are not," Elena said. "But we have to prove it, and we have to do it fast. The hearing for this will be scheduled within the week. It is an emergency petition." I looked at my hands. They were pale, thin. I looked at the bruise on the back of my hand from the IV. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the casserole dish through the window. I wanted to drive to their house and scream until my throat bled. But screaming was what they wanted. Screaming was erratic behavior. Screaming was instability. I took a deep breath. No screaming. I said, I looked at Elena. "What do we need?" I asked. "We need doctors." Elena said, "I need your attending physician from the hospital to swear an affidavit that you are fully lucid. I need a psychiatrist to evaluate you and confirm you are competent, and we need to assemble the timeline of the fraud so tightly that the judge sees this petition for what it is, a cover-up." I pulled the notebook toward me. The notebook where I had logged the call times. The notebook where I had written down the nurse's comment about the hand steadiness. "I have the timeline," I said. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. "We are going to bury them," I said. Walter put a hand on my shoulder. "That is the spirit," he said. I looked at the petition again. Continuity of care. They wanted continuity. All right, they wanted the continuity of my silence. They wanted the continuity of their access to my credit. I picked up the pen. I am not a resource. I wrote at the top of the page. I underlined it twice. I am the witness. Elena picked up her phone. "I am going to call the court clerk. We are contesting this, and I am going to file a cross petition for a restraining order based on financial abuse." "Do it," I said. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. The house was quiet again. The silver Mercedes was gone. The flowers were in the trash. But the war was in the room with us. I wasn't ready to fight. My body was still broken. My heart was still hurting in a way that had nothing to do with electrolytes. But as I looked at my grandfather, washing the dishes in the fading light, and at Elena, sharpening her legal knives at the table, I knew I didn't have to be ready. I just had to be right. And for the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain that my parents were wrong. Let them come, I thought. Let them tell the judge I'm crazy. I will tell the judge the truth, and the truth was going to burn everything down. The following weeks were a lesson in the physics of stress. I learned that my body was no longer a silent machine I could ignore until the work was done. It was a barometer. If I slept less than 8 hours, my hands shook. If I skipped a meal, the dizziness came on like a sudden drop in cabin pressure. And if I thought too hard about the fact that my parents were currently suing me for the right to control the life they had already mortgaged, my blood pressure bottomed out and I had to lie on Walter's living room rug with my legs elevated on the sofa. I went to my follow-up appointments. I sat in waiting rooms filled with people twice my age, clutching a water bottle and a bag of salted pretzels, my new medicine. The endocrinologist explained the cortisol replacement therapy. He talked about adrenal crisis and stress management. "You have to eliminate the triggers," he said. Looking at my chart, "You cannot afford high-stress situations right now. Your body does not have the reserves to handle a fight." I nodded and took the prescription. I didn't tell him that the fight was sitting in my email inbox and listed on the county court docket. I didn't tell him that my trigger was the 2 people who had given me half my DNA. I was learning to pace my days. Wake up. Pills. Breakfast. Work remotely for 4 hours. My boss had been surprisingly understanding, allowing me to log in from Walter's kitchen table. Nap. Legal strategy with Elena. Dinner. Sleep. It was a small life. It was a quiet life. And in the silence of Walter's house, surrounded by the smell of cedar and old paper, I had to confront the grief. It wasn't a sharp, stabbing grief. It was a dull ache, like a bone that had healed wrong. I realized that for 33 years. I had believed my parents' love was a solid object. I thought it was a foundation, but it wasn't. It was a transaction. They loved me when I was successful because my success reflected well on them. They loved me when I was compliant because my compliance made their lives easier. But the moment I became a complication, the moment I became a separate entity with my own needs and my own boundaries, the love evaporated. It was conditional. It had always been conditional. I was just the last one to figure it out. Elena Marsh arrived on a rainy Tuesday with a thick binder and a grim expression. She declined Walter's offer of coffee. She spread documents out on the kitchen table, covering the lace runner Walter kept there. "We found the money," Elena said. I sat down, bracing myself. "How much?" "The total debt across all accounts, the line of credit, the vehicle, and 2 credit cards we just found this morning is $84,000, Elena said. The number hit me in the chest. 84,000. That was more than my student loans. That was a down payment on a house. Where did it go, I asked. They don't have $84,000 worth of stuff. Their house is mortgaged to the hilt. They lease their cars. Elena flipped a page. It went to a company called Apex Consulting Group. She said, "It is a shell company registered to Gordon. It looks like he was trying to launch a boutique investment firm about 2 years ago. He rented office space downtown. He hired a branding agency. He traveled to conferences in London and Dubai to court investors. He never told me that," I whispered. "He told me he was doing consulting for a logistics firm. He was trying to look like a tycoon." Elena said, "But he didn't have the capital. So he used the Bailey Family Holdings entity to secure credit. And since his personal credit is shot, he has 2 prior bankruptcies I dug up from the 90s. He used the next best thing." "Me," I said. "You." Elena confirmed. "You had a perfect credit score. You had a steady income. You were the clean asset. They burned through the $84,000 in 18 months. The office rent alone was $5,000 a month. The travel was first class." I looked at the spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, Ritz-Carlton, Delta Airlines, Herman Miller. They bought office furniture with my name. I said, "They flew first class on my credit, and when the business failed to launch." Elena said, "The bills came due." That is when the default notices started. That is when they started intercepting your mail. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just greed. It was delusion. Gordon wanted to play the big shot, and he was willing to bankrupt his daughter to keep the costume on for a few more months. "There is more," Walter said from the sink. I turned to him. He was washing dishes, his back to us, but his shoulders were tight. "I didn't tell you this before, Stella, because I didn't want to upset you." Walter said. He turned off the water and dried his hands on a towel. "But about 6 months ago, I went to see a lawyer of my own. Not Elena. An estate guy in town. Why, I asked. Because Gordon came to me again." Walter said, "He wanted me to sign over the deed to this house. He said it would be safer in a trust. He said he could manage it for me so I wouldn't have to worry about property taxes." I stared at him. "They tried to take your house." Walter nodded. I told him no. But I got a bad feeling. I realized that if something happened to me, if I died, the house and my savings would go to Marla. She is my only child. He walked over to the table and placed a hand on my shoulder. So I changed my will. "Stella, everything skips a generation. The house, the shop, the little bit of savings I have, it all goes directly to you." I looked up at him. His eyes were clear and sad. "I anticipated this fight," he said. "I didn't know they were already stealing from you. But I knew that if they got their hands on my estate, they would bleed it dry and leave you with nothing. I wanted to make sure you had a roof over your head that they couldn't mortgage." I reached up and covered his hand with mine. "You protected me," I said, "even when I didn't know I needed protecting." Walter shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "A grandfather's job is to look out for the future. Parents, well, parents are supposed to do that too. But sometimes they get confused about whose future matters more." That night, unable to sleep, I did something I knew I shouldn't do. I opened Instagram. I had blocked my parents, but I hadn't blocked their friends. I went to the profile of one of Marla's tennis partners, a woman who tagged my mother in everything. I scrolled back 2 weeks, to graduation day. There it was, a photo of me. It was taken just before I walked to the staging area. I was smiling, looking pale but happy, holding my cap. In the original moment, Walter had been standing right next to me. I remembered his hand on my elbow. I remembered the gray wool of his suit. But in the photo posted online, Walter was gone. The image had been cropped, tight. It was just me, centered, with a blurring filter applied to the edges to hide the edit. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of our girl master's degree in the bag. We have watched her work so hard for this. The Bailey legacy continues. Proud parents' graduation family success." I stared at the screen. They had cropped him out. Walter had driven an hour, sat in the cheap seats, and held my hand while I bled out into the floorboards of the arena. My parents hadn't even been in the building, but on the internet, they were the proud architects of my success, and Walter was invisible. They erased him. I whispered to the empty room, just like they are trying to erase me. It was a small thing, a digital slight, but it hurt more than the debt. It was proof that to them, people were just props. If the prop didn't fit the frame, you cut it out. Walter didn't fit the narrative of the wealthy, successful power couple. He looked like a retired steelworker, so he had to go. And now that I was sick, now that I was suing them, I was about to be cropped out too. The next morning, Jenna came over. Jenna Hart was my college roommate, a chaotic whirlwind of a woman who worked in IT security and had zero tolerance for nonsense. She arrived with a box of donuts and a laptop covered in stickers. "Okay, let's look at this email situation," she said, sitting at the table while I ate a glazed donut. I logged into my old Gmail account, the one I had regained access to, but which I was afraid to use. Jenna clicked through the settings with the speed of a concert pianist. "Here it is," she said after 30 seconds. She turned the screen toward me. Under filters and blocked addresses, there was a rule: if subject includes overdue, payment, verify, bank, credit, Apex, Midland, then mark as read, skip inbox, forward to G. Bailey, private consulting, net. "It wasn't a hack," Jenna said, shaking her head. "It was a rule. Someone logged in probably because you saved your password on their browser years ago and set this up. It is clean, efficient. You never saw the warnings because they were archived instantly. And the forwarding address I asked, Gordon," Jenna said, "that is his consulting domain. So he saw everything." I said, "Every warning. Every desperate plea from the bank. He saw it." Jenna said, "And he ignored it, or he filed it away." She looked at me, her expression softening. "Stella, this is cold," she said. "This takes planning. You don't accidentally set up email filters. You do this when you want to make sure your victim stays blind." Victim. I hated the word, but looking at the screen, at the automated efficiency of my own destruction, I couldn't argue with it. 2 days before the hearing, the threats moved from the digital world to the physical one. I received a letter addressed to me at Walter's house. I had forwarded my mail, and the creditors were catching up. It was from a collection agency representing Midland Auto Finance. Notice of intent to garnish wages. Unless the outstanding balance of $28,000 is resolved within 10 days, we will seek a court order to garnish 25% of your disposable earnings from your employer. I dropped the letter. "They are going to call my job," I said. Elena picked up the letter. "They can do that," she said. "If they get a judgment, if my boss finds out I am being garnished for $28,000 of bad debt. I could lose my security clearance." I said, "I work in data management. Financial instability is a red flag. I could lose my job. That is what they are counting on." Elena said, or rather, "They don't care. But we can use this." "Use it?" I asked. "My career is about to be torched. We use it to show damages." Elena said, We file an emergency motion to stay the garnishment based on the pending fraud investigation. But Stella, you need to understand something. She looked me in the eye. To stop this, we have to implicate your parents criminally. We have to file a police report that names Gordon and Marla Bailey as the perpetrators of the fraud. We can't just say someone did it. We have to say they did it. I looked at the window. The rain was falling again, washing the dust off Walter's truck. I knew what that meant. A police report meant an investigation. An investigation meant potential charges, grand larceny, identity theft, prison time. I don't want them to go to prison, I said quietly. I just want my life back. Elena sighed. She put her pen down. That is the paradox. Stella, you want to save yourself without destroying them, but they are currently trying to destroy you to save themselves. They filed for guardianship. They are trying to take your legal rights away. She leaned forward. You cannot parry forever, eventually. You have to strike. If you don't file the police report, the creditors will assume the debt is yours. They will take your wages. You will lose your job. You will be liable for $84,000, and your parents will continue to live in their house, driving their leased cars, telling everyone you are confused. I felt the tears hot on my face. Why do I have to be the executioner, I asked. Why do I have to be the one to drop the hammer? Because they made you the target, Walter said. I hadn't heard him come in. He was standing in the doorway, holding his chest. Grandpa, I said. He grimaced, leaning against the doorframe. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. I am okay, he wheezed. Just dizzy. I scrambled up, my chair clattering to the floor. Elena was already dialing 911. We got him to the couch. He sat down heavily, clutching at his shirt. It is just angina, he gasped. I forgot my pill. I found his nitroglycerin on the mantel and put it under his tongue. We waited. The color slowly returned to his cheeks. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later, but he refused to go. The paramedics checked his vitals, blood pressure high, heart rate stabilizing, and scolded him, but let him sign the refusal form. When they left, the house was quiet again, but the air had changed. I sat on the floor by the couch, holding his hand. You scared me. I said, I scared myself. Walter admitted. He looked at me, his eyes serious. Stella, I am 80 years old. I am not going to be here forever. I am your safe harbor right now, but I am a temporary structure. He squeezed my hand. You have to be able to stand on your own. If I die tomorrow, and those vultures have guardianship over you, they win. They take the house. They take you. He closed his eyes. You have to finish this. Stella, you have to burn it down, because if you don't, they will burn you. I looked at him. I looked at the frailty of his chest rising and falling. He was right. I was waiting for them to apologize. I was waiting for them to stop, but they wouldn't stop. They were a fire, and fire doesn't have a conscience. It just consumes. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen table where my phone lay. Elena watched me. What are you doing? She asked. I am calling them. I said. Elena sat up straighter. Wait. If you call them, record it. This state has a one-party consent law. You don't have to tell them you are recording. I nodded. I downloaded a recording app. I tested it. Then I dialed Marla's number. It rang 4 times. Hello. Marla's voice was cautious. Mom, it is me. I said. I sounded small. I made myself sound small. I made my voice tremble. Stella. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Are you at Walter's? I am confused. Mom, I said, I am looking at all these papers. The guardianship petition, the debt letters. I don't know what to do. Elena gave me a thumbs up. I was playing the part. I was giving them what they wanted, a confused, scared daughter looking for a parent. Honey, listen to me, Marla said, her voice shifting instantly into soothing, managerial mode. Put the papers down. You don't need to worry about that. That is why we filed the petition. We want to take that burden off you. But the debt, I said, the $80,000? Gordon's voice came on the line. Stella, Focus. The debt is manageable. We have a plan to restructure it, but we can't do that if you are fighting us. We need authority. Did you handle the other paperwork too, I asked? The hospital forms? Yes, Gordon said. He sounded impatient. We told you. We handled the admission forms to keep things moving. We handled the insurance. We have been handling everything. We just need you to sign the assent to the guardianship. And this all goes away. Goes away, I asked. The lawsuits, the creditors. We can make it all quiet. Marla said, we can protect you. But you have to stop this nonsense with the lawyer. You have to come home. I closed my eyes. So you signed the hospital forms, I asked one last time. To be sure, we signed them. Stella Gordon snapped. We did what was necessary. Now, are you going to cooperate, or are you going to keep acting like a child? I looked at the phone. I looked at the red dot of the recording app. I am not a child. Dad. I said. My voice dropped the tremble. It was cold. It was hard. And I am not coming home. I hung up. I saved the file. Elena let out a breath she had been holding. They admitted it, she said. They admitted to signing the forms. They admitted to handling the insurance. And they tried to coerce you into signing a guardianship agreement to make the debt go quiet. Is it enough, I asked? It is a confession. Elena said, it proves they are acting to cover up financial malfeasance, not to provide care. No judge in this state will grant them guardianship after hearing that tape. She stood up and started packing her bag with a furious energy. I am going to the judge in the morning. I am filing for an emergency order to block the petition based on this evidence and the affidavits from your doctors. We are going to affirm your capacity. And then I asked, and then? Elena said, we have the hearing, the big one, next week. We walk into that courtroom and we lay it all out, the fraud, the forgery, the coercion. She paused at the door. You will have to testify. Stella, you will have to look them in the face and say these things. Can you do that? I looked at Walter, who was sleeping on the couch, his chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. I looked at the graduation photo on the mantel, the real one, where my grandfather was standing next to me. I thought about the tuna casserole. I thought about the cropped photo. I thought about the clean credit. They had spent 33 years training me to be their perfect reflection. They had taught me to smile for the camera and hide the mess. Well, I learned the lesson. I can do it, I said. Elena nodded and left. I stood in the quiet house. I was terrified. My hands were shaking, not from illness, but from the sheer voltage of the anger running through me. I didn't want revenge. I really didn't. I just wanted to be the person who wasn't cropped out of the picture, and if I had to break the frame to do it, then so be it. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. A scent that I would forever associate with the day I finally stopped being a daughter and started being a plaintiff. I had spent hours agonizing over what to wear. My instinct, honed by 3 decades of living with Marla and Gordon, was to armor myself, to wear the sharpest blazer I owned, to put on heels that clicked with authority, to paint my face into a mask of invulnerability. I wanted to look like the successful professional they claimed I wasn't. I wanted to look like I didn't have a chronic illness that required me to swallow hydrocortisone tablets every 4 hours. But Walter had stopped me. He had stood in the doorway of the guest room as I held up a Navy power suit. You don't need to perform for them. Stella, he had said, the truth doesn't need shoulder pads. Just be yourself. So I walked into the courthouse wearing a simple gray cardigan over a white blouse and comfortable black trousers. I wore my glasses, not my contacts. I didn't wear makeup to hide the pale cast of my skin or the shadows under my eyes. I walked slowly, measuring my energy with every step, clutching the railing as I ascended the stone steps. I wasn't performing strength. I was simply refusing to disappear. Walter walked behind me. He didn't hold my arm. He knew I needed to do this on my own legs, but his presence was a physical weight at my back, a shield against the wind. He wore his Sunday suit, the same one he had worn to my graduation, and he carried a battered leather satchel containing his own copy of the evidence. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and intimate. The air conditioning was humming a low, aggressive drone. My parents were already there. They sat at the table on the left, flanked by a lawyer I didn't recognize, a man with slicked-back hair and a suit that cost more than Walter's truck. Marla looked impeccable. She wore a soft, pastel blue dress that suggested maternal warmth, a pearl necklace, and a tissue clutched theatrically in her hand. Gordon sat rigid, reviewing papers, looking every inch the concerned patriarch managing a difficult family crisis. They looked up when I entered. Marla's face crumpled into an expression of tragic hope. She made a small, aborted movement as if to stand up and rush to me, but Gordon placed a hand on her forearm. Restraining her, it was a perfect tableau the loving mother held back by the necessary formalities of the law. I didn't look at them. I walked to the table on the right where Elena Marsh was waiting. "Ready?" Elena asked. She didn't smile. Her eyes were hard and bright, like polished stones. I sat down. I placed my water bottle on the table. "Ready," I said. The bailiff called the room to order. The Honorable Judge Holloway entered. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression that suggested she had seen every variation of human greed the county had to offer. "This is the matter of the petition for temporary guardianship of Stella J. Bailey, filed by Gordon and Marla Bailey," Judge Holloway said, "and the cross-petition for a protective order filed by the respondent." She looked over her glasses at the room. "We are here to determine if Ms. Bailey is competent to manage her own affairs, or if, as the petitioners allege, she is in a state of medical and psychological crisis requiring intervention." My parents' lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and rich. "This is a tragic case. My clients are loving, devoted parents who are watching their only child suffer from a severe adrenal collapse that has affected her cognitive functions. Ms. Bailey is currently under the influence of heavy steroid treatments. She is paranoid. She is refusing contact with the people who have supported her financially and emotionally her entire life. We are simply asking for temporary authority to ensure she receives the care she needs and to prevent her from making catastrophic financial decisions while she is unwell." He gestured toward me as if I were a broken vase they were trying to glue back together. "To support this, we have brought witnesses who can attest to Ms. Bailey's recent confusion and the family's long-standing financial cooperation." "Witnesses," I whispered to Elena. Elena scribbled on her pad. "Don't react." The first witness was a woman named Mrs. Higgins. She was a friend of Marla's from the tennis club. She took the stand and testified that she had seen me at a brunch 3 months ago and that I had seemed overwhelmed and grateful for my parents' help with my bills. It was vague. It was hearsay. But it painted a picture of a dependent child. Then came the second witness. A man walked in. He was young, dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a leather folio. "State your name for the record." The clerk said, "Julian Thorne." The man said, "I am a financial consultant for Apex Consulting." I stiffened. "Apex, the shell company." Julian Thorne testified with a confident, practiced ease. He claimed that he had met with Gordon and me 18 months ago at a coffee shop downtown. "Ms. Bailey was very enthusiastic about the venture," Julian said, looking directly at the judge. "She agreed to leverage her credit profile to help launch the firm. She explicitly stated that she wanted to be a silent partner. She signed the initial credit applications in my presence." I stared at him. I had never seen this man in my life. I had never been to a meeting with him. I had never agreed to be a partner. "He is lying," I hissed to Elena. Elena didn't look up. She was writing furiously. "So," Julian continued, "when I heard she was now claiming fraud, I was shocked. It seems consistent with the medical confusion her parents are describing. She simply forgot the agreement. It was polished. It was plausible. It was exactly the kind of story that could fool strangers because it relied on the assumption that families don't frame each other." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," the parents' lawyer said. "No further questions." Elena stood up. She walked toward the witness stand slowly, holding a single piece of paper. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "you stated that this meeting took place on October 14th, 18 months ago." Yes, that is correct, Julian said. And Ms. Bailey was there in person, yes. Elena handed the paper to the judge, then a copy to the witness. This is a time-stamped employment record from Ms. Bailey's employer, Elena said. On October 14th, 18 months ago, Ms. Bailey was at a mandatory off-site training seminar in Chicago. Here is the flight manifest. Here is the hotel receipt in her name. And here is a time-stamped photo of her receiving a certification at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The room went quiet. Julian Thorne looked at the paper. He blinked. Perhaps I have the date wrong, he stammered. It might have been the week after. And the credit application you claim she signed in your presence, Elena asked. She pulled another document from her stack, the one dated October 14th. Julian was silent, if she wasn't there. Mr. Thorne? Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. Then who signed it? Or did you and Mr. Bailey sign it yourselves? Objection, the parent's lawyer shouted. Sustained, Judge Holloway said. But she was looking at Julian Thorne with a new harshness. You may step down, Mr. Thorne. Elena walked back to the table. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like a mechanic who had just located the loose screw. Your Honor, Elena said. We move to dismiss the petitioner's claims of incapacity and introduce evidence of systematic identity fraud and coercion. Proceed, the judge said. Elena began to dismantle them. It wasn't a dramatic, shouting takedown. It was a surgical dissection. She projected the hospital log onto the screen. Exhibit A, Elena said, a digital upload of a durable power of attorney, time-stamped at 10:42 a.m. on the day of Ms. Bailey's collapse. At this exact minute, EMS records show Ms. Bailey was unconscious in an ambulance. Yet, this document was uploaded from a static IP address registered to the petitioner's home residence. Marla shifted in her seat. Gordon stared straight ahead, his jaw working. Exhibit B. Elena continued. An audio recording from the insurer. Meridian Health. She pressed play. The courtroom filled with Marla's voice. Goldie. A little goldfish. The judge listened. Her expression unreadable. Marla's face turned a blotchy red. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head. Exhibit C. Elena said, a forensic analysis of the signatures on the credit accounts opened in Miss Bailey's name compared to her verified signature on her graduate school thesis and driver's license. 2 images appeared on the screen. One was my real signature jagged, hurried, the J connected to the B. The other was the signature on the Apex documents looped, neat, the J separated. The expert conclusion is that the signatures on the debt instruments are forgeries, Elena stated, likely traced or pasted from older documents. Elena turned to face my parents. These are not the actions of parents protecting a sick child, Elena said. These are the actions of individuals attempting to conceal a financial crime by seizing legal control of the victim. She sat down. The judge looked at my parents' table. Does the petitioner have a response to these exhibits? Judge Holloway asked. Gordon stood up. He didn't wait for his lawyer. Your Honor, this is a distortion, he said, his voice booming. We have handled Stella's paperwork for years. She asked us to. She is overwhelmed by her job, by school. We were helping her, the email forwarding. The accounts, it was all done with her implicit permission to build a family estate. Implicit permission is not a signature. Mr. Bailey, the judge said sharply. Sit down. The judge turned to me. Miss Bailey, she said, please take the stand. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through water. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the room. I saw Walter in the back row, his hands folded in his lap, watching me. Judge Holloway looked at me. Miss Bailey, she said, I have heard a lot of conflicting narratives today. Your parents claim you are confused and paranoid. Your lawyer claims you are a victim of fraud. I want to ask you a simple question. She paused. On the day of your collapse, your parents were notified by the hospital. They did not attend. Why? The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the lights. I looked at Marla. She was looking at me with pleading eyes, silently begging me to protect the image. Don't say it. Stella, don't make us look bad. I looked at Gordon. He was glaring. A silent threat. Remember who pays for things. Remember who you are. But they didn't pay for things. I paid for them. I paid with my credit. I paid with my identity. I paid with my health. I took a breath. They were contacted. Your Honor. I said. My voice was quiet, but steady. The doctors called them multiple times. They chose not to come. Why, the judge asked. Because they were afraid. I said, afraid of your condition. No. I said, afraid of being seen. They had defaulted on the loans they took out in my name. They were afraid that if they appeared at a hospital and put their names on admission forms, the creditors tracking them would find them. They were hiding from a skip trace. A gasp went through the room. It was Mrs. Higgins, the family friend. Marla let out a sob. It was a loud, wrenching sound. I was protecting you, Marla cried out. Standing up, she ignored her lawyer's hand grabbing her dress. I didn't want the stress of the creditors to affect your recovery if they found us. They would garnish you. I was trying to keep the wolves away. Stella. She was crying real tears. I could see them tracking through her foundation. But even in her breakdown, she was the hero. She wasn't absent. She was a martyr. She wasn't a fraudster. She was a shield. Ms. Bailey. Sit down, the judge ordered. Marla collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. I watched her, and for the first time, the anger drained away, leaving only a profound, exhausted clarity. She believes it, I said into the microphone. I wasn't talking to the judge anymore. I was talking to the air. She really believes that avoiding the consequences of her actions is the same thing as love. Gordon stood up then. He didn't shout. He buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, he said, his voice controlled, though his face was red. This is a family misunderstanding that has spiraled out of control. We are happy to dissolve the guardianship petition if Stella agrees to come home and let us sort out the financials privately. We don't need the court to intervene in a family ledger. The judge looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Bailey, she said, you have just heard evidence that you forged a medical power of attorney. That is not a family ledger issue. That is a criminal matter. Before Gordon could respond, the court clerk stood up. Your Honor. The clerk said, I have a filing that was submitted late last night by the petitioner's counsel. It wasn't entered into the main docket yet. The clerk handed a document to the judge. The judge read it. Her eyebrows went up. She handed it to Elena. Elena read it. She looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just slid the paper across the table so I could see it. Proposed settlement agreement. I read the terms. 1. Petitioners. Gordon and Marla Bailey agree to withdraw the guardianship petition. 2. Respondent Stella Bailey agrees to assume full liability for the debts held by Apex Capital and Midland Auto Finance. 3. Respondent agrees to a permanent non-disclosure agreement regarding all family financial matters. 4. Petitioners agree to pay respondent a one-time care stipend of $5,000. I stared at the paper. They wanted to buy my silence. They were willing to drop the She's Crazy Act if I agreed to eat the $84,000 of debt and promise never to tell anyone what they did. It was a transaction. It was always a transaction. $5,000. That was what they thought my dignity was worth. That was the price of a daughter. I looked up at Walter. He saw the look on my face. He didn't know what was in the paper, but he knew what it meant. He gave me a small nod. It wasn't a nod of encouragement. It was a nod of permission. He was telling me that I didn't have to save them. He was telling me that the contract was broken, and I didn't have to be the one to glue it back together. I looked at the judge. This was filed last night, I asked. Yes. The judge said, so while they were sitting here listening to their lawyer argue that I am mentally incompetent and need their protection, I said, they had a contract ready for me to sign that would make me liable for their debts in exchange for their silence. I held up the paper. If I am competent enough to sign this settlement, Your Honor, then I am competent enough to refuse it. I ripped the paper in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Rip. I refuse. I said, I refuse the settlement. I refuse the guardianship, and I refuse to be their collateral anymore. Gordon looked like I had slapped him. For the first time, the mask of the aggrieved father slipped completely, revealing the panic underneath. He realized that his leverage was gone. He had nothing left to trade. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. Order, she said. She shuffled her papers. She didn't look at my parents. She looked at me. The court finds that the respondent, Stella Bailey, is fully competent, the judge said. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied with prejudice. She turned to my parents. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented regarding the unauthorized access to medical records and the apparent forgery of the power of attorney, I am issuing a permanent protective order, Mr. and Mrs. Bailey. You are to have no contact with the respondent. You are removed from all medical and financial authorizations immediately. She paused, looking at the heap of documents Elena had submitted. Regarding the financial fraud, the judge said, "This court does not have jurisdiction over criminal identity theft. However, I am flagging these exhibits for review by the district attorney's office. I am also issuing a temporary injunction freezing the assets of Bailey Family Holdings pending a forensic audit." Gordon stood up. "Your Honor, you can't freeze the accounts we have outstanding. Sit down." "Mr. Bailey," the judge barked, "or I will hold you in contempt." Gordon sat. He looked at Marla. Marla was staring at the floor, twisting her tissue into a tight, white rope. The judge looked back at me. "Ms. Bailey," she said, "the financial resolution of these debts will be complex. It will require civil litigation to disentangle your name from these accounts. This order today does not wipe the debt away instantly, but it stops the bleeding. Thank you, Your Honor." I said, "Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. I walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. My knees were shaking, but I was upright. Elena was already on her phone, calling the credit bureaus to update them on the court order. She gave me a quick, fierce smile. "We got them," she mouthed. I leaned against the wall. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. Walter came out of the courtroom. He walked over to me. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, a sturdy, flannel-clad reality in a world of suits and lies. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of peppermint antacids. He offered me one. I took it. The sharp, chalky taste was grounding. "You ripped the paper," Walter said. "That was a nice touch. I didn't plan it." I said, "It just felt right." The courtroom doors opened again. My parents walked out. They stopped when they saw us. This was the moment in the movies where they scream, or beg, or apologize. But life isn't a movie. Gordon looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. He was already calculating his next move, his next spin. He adjusted his cufflinks. "You have made a terrible mistake. Stella," he said. His voice was low. "You think you won. You just exposed us all. You just publicly humiliated the only people who would have taken care of you when that grandpa of yours is gone." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. I saw the smallness of him. "I didn't expose you, Dad," I said. "I just turned on the light." Marla didn't look at me. She was putting on her sunglasses, hiding her red eyes. She was already retreating into the next performance, the one where she was the victim of an ungrateful child in a cruel legal system. "Come on, Gordon," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's go. I have a headache." They walked past us. They walked down the long marble hallway, their footsteps echoing. Click, clack, click, clack. I watched them go. I waited for the pang of regret. I waited for the little girl inside me to cry out for them to come back, but she didn't. The little girl was gone. She had been left on the floor of the arena. The woman standing in the hallway took a deep breath. The air smelled of floor wax and coffee, but it also smelled of something else. It smelled like rain. Clean, cold rain. I turned to Walter. "Let's go home." "Grandpa," I said. He nodded. He offered me his arm. I didn't need it for support anymore, but I took it anyway. We walked out of the courthouse, into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. The debt was still there. The illness was still there. The road ahead was going to be messy, filled with lawyers and audits and difficult days. But as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I checked my phone. There was an email from the court system, order granted, and below that, a text from Jenna. Pizza tonight, I'm buying. I smiled. I wasn't a resource anymore. I wasn't an asset. I wasn't a liability. I was just Stella. And for the first time in 33 years, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to When I Collapsed at My Graduation. The doctors called my parents, but only Grandpa came. I hope Stella's journey of finding her voice and breaking free resonated with you. It is a hard road to walk when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But as Stella found out, the truth is the only solid ground worth standing on. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let me know your thoughts on the ending. Did Stella make the right choice by refusing the settlement? Until next time, take care of yourselves.